Hello everybody, it's Hater. Welcome back to another Destiny 2 build video, and we're going to do something a little different today. Because with the demon that is 2021 being slain, there were a lot of builds that I made over the course of the entire season. 27 to be specific. Each and every one of those builds, I had an absolute blast making because you guys kept flooding in with the love and support of my newfound passion of build crafting. So to commemorate the occasion in today's video, we're going to talk about the 3 best Warlock builds of Season of the Lost, each centered around a type of content and why they're the best of the best when it comes to it. Before we get into that though guys, if you enjoy the video, then leave a like, comment what your favorite Warlock build is this season, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already to stay up to date for whenever a new build video goes out. But the way this video is going to work is that I'm going to be going over each build one at a time, talk about what it does, why it's so good, and what content it specializes in. If you're also interested in using these builds for yourself, then there will be 3 dim loadout links, one for each build, down in the description so you can optimize and make them for your own loadouts. But starting off with the first build guys, it's going to be the Eyasluna Stasis Turret Warlock build. This is also the build being played in the background since the beginning of the video in a GM level Nightfall. But to be frank, this is probably one of, if not my favorite builds that I've ever made, because what it does is combine a Headstone Eyasluna hand cannon from the Grasp of Avarice dungeon with the permanent CC capabilities of the Shadebinder Warlock. The main use of a Stasis Warlock since the beginning was to abuse the Bleak Watcher aspect, allowing them to turn their grenades into a Stasis turret that will shoot and eventually freeze enemies. Bungie has since tried to nerf the Bleak Watcher so Warlock mains can't spam multiple Stasis turrets at once, to the point now where their cooldown is matched with the Ice Wall grenade. But after Eyasluna was reintroduced to the game, Bungie made it a Stasis weapon and allowed it to roll the perk Headstone. This changed literally everything for the Stasis Warlock meta, because up until then, Warlocks would use weapons like Vulpecula, the Peace Bond, Traveler's Chosen, or Aeger's Scepter to gain their grenade energy back. With Eyasluna combined with Headstone, Whisper of Shards, and Whisper of Rending, it blew all other competition out of the water because of how efficiently it gave grenade energy back and killed adds at the exact same time. So much so in fact that Stasis Warlocks can now maintain upwards to 2 to 3 turrets at once outside of champions. But I think that's enough of me hyping up the build. Let's go into the loadout and talk about where everything's gonna go. For the aspects, we're gonna be using the Wombo combo of Bleak Watcher with Glacial Harvest. For the fragments, we're gonna be using Whisper of Fissures so that the crystal that Headstone creates will hit from a further range and deal more damage. Whisper of Shard so that when the crystal explodes, we're also gonna get grenade energy back over time. Whisper of Rending so that it only takes 1 bullet from Eyasluna to shatter the Headstone crystal instead of 2. And Whisper of Conduction to suck in all of the Stasis shards from Glacial Harvest. Moving over to the loadout, for my Eyasluna, I have it with Headstone and Unrelenting. Any Eyasluna that you guys have will work, just make sure that it has Headstone. But because we're using Eyasluna with Headstone, there isn't any champion mods that we can work with it because it's a hand cannon. To compensate for that, we'll be using an exotic weapon in either our energy slot or our heavy slot. The 3 that I really like using is Divinity, Ariana's Vow, and the Lament. Any combination of these 3 weapons are going to be able to deal with champions that I need to deal with. Moving over to the armor and starting off with the helmet minus solar, and I have Explosive Wellmaker at the end with a linear fusion rifle ammo finder. For my exotic, I'm using Aeon Soul so that I can create heavy and special ammo for my fire team. You guys don't have to run this exotic, you could use something like Eye of Another World or Verity's Brow or something else that could synergize with the build. But on my Aeon Soul, I have it as Stasis Energy with Elemental Shards at the end of it and a champion mod depending on what kind of exotic weapon I'm bringing. In this case, I'm using Divinity, so I'm using an Unstoppable Linear Fusion Rifle. Over at my chest piece, I have this as Solar with a Elemental Charge at the end of it, and 2 damage resist mods that I could change out depending on what GM I bring this build into. Next up, over at my boots, I have these as Void, and because mine are the Grasp of Avarice dungeon variant, I have an extra slot at the end for my Linear Fusion Rifle and Fusion Rifle ammo scav. For you guys, if you don't have this kind of armor, the only thing that would be different is that I would take the Trace Rifle ammo scav out and just have the Linear Fusion Rifle and Fusion Rifle ammo scav in its place. But next to it, I'm using better already, so if I pick up Orbs of Power, it instantly starts healing my shields and Protective Light at the end because it matches Void. Then finally, over at my Bond, it's Solar with a Well of Ordnance at the end, Particle Deconstruction, and Resonant Siphon. This part of the armor is my Jack of all trades piece because I could change out all of the artifact mods depending on what kind of loadout I'm bringing. Since I'm using a fusion rifle in this build, I have Particle Deconstruction and Resonant Siphon, but if I want to bring something like my Lament, I'll swap the Particle Deconstruction out for Passive Guard. Overall guys, that is the Stasis Warlock build. As for the content that this build excels in, without a doubt, it's anything that involves champions. So that means GM Nightfalls, master versions of the Grasp of Avarice Dungeon and Vault of Glass Raid. Moving over to the second build, it's gonna be Well of Radiance and its unnatural ability to be the jack of all trades when it comes to builds. You need to solo flawless the Grasp of Avarice Dungeon? Well of Radiance. You need to farm GM Nightfalls? Well of Radiance. You need to provide damage buffs to your team against a raid boss? Well of Radiance. It does it all. There's a reason why everyone keeps a Well Lock on their team for literally anything. When it comes to mods for Well of Radiance though, there isn't a specific build for it, but every single one of them starts with a template of Taking Charge with Protective Light. The rest comes down to the type of content or loadout the Well of Radiance Warlock is using. For an example, we'll use the build that I used in my solo flawless Grasp of Avarice video. And where the build starts is, as always, Taking Charge with Protective Light. I have Taking Charge in my arms, and then I have Protective Light in my boots. In my helmet, I have it as Solar, and I'm using Well of Life with a Fusion Rifle Ammo Finder and a Linear Fusion Rifle Ammo Finder. With my Taking Charge, I have a Fusion Rifle Loader and a Linear Fusion Rifle Loader. In my chest piece, I have it as Void with Font of Might at the end of it, with 2 damage resist mods that I can swap out based on what part of the dungeon I'm in. On my Lunafaction boots, you could use Ophidian Aspect, you can use anything depending on what you're bringing into the dungeon. Next to my Protective Light, I have the Artifact Linear Fusion Rifle and Fusion Rifle Ammo Scav, and a better already so Orbs of Power immediately start healing my shields. Then finally, over at my Bond, I'm using Elemental Armaments so that my solar weapons will create a Solar Elemental Well to give me Well of Life and Font of Might. Next to it, I'm using Particle Deconstruction because I'm using a Fusion Rifle and Sleeper Simulant for DPS. Then my kinetic weapon for the loadout is going to be a Night Watch with Explosive Payload, a Cartesian Coordinate with Vorpal Weapon and Lead from Gold. Then I'm using Sleeper Simulant with the Catalyst for DPS. In the end guys, support, adapt, overcome is the name of the game with this build, and it always starts with Taking Charge with Protective Light. The rest just comes down to the content you're bringing it into. Now for the first build, we talked about endless amounts of CC with stasis turrets. For the second build, we just talked about the jack of all trades that is Well of Radiance. But for the third build, and the final build of today's video, we're going to talk about how Controverse Hold can solo farm literally every lost sector in the game. The way that this works is that we're going to take advantage of Controverse Hold's exotic perk, Chaotic Exchanger, to gain grenade energy back after hitting enemies with a grenade. Bungie also just recently changed how this perk works so that it is more consistent overall. Instead of a random time frame between 1 and 4 seconds that Chaotic Exchanger will proc, it's always going to be a flat 1.75 seconds. Meaning in layman's terms, no more grenade gambling. It's always going to be right around 30 to 50% of the grenade back every time we throw it. Then when we start pairing it with mods like Explosive Well Maker, Bountiful Wells, and Well of Ordnance, it creates a beautiful synergy, almost giving our grenade back every single time something dies. And here's the kicker, because some people will argue that Elemental Ordnance is better because you get more energy back from the well matching our subclass. Something that they're skimming over is that Explosive Well Maker isn't limited to just the grenade. Anything, and I mean anything that is considered explosive damage, will proc Explosive Well Maker and give us 2 solar wells that give grenade energy back. Meaning in the long run, we can get more bang for our buck when it comes to the loadout, because we're going to be using weapons like Blinding Grenade Launchers, Galahorn, and my personal favorite, Deafening Whisper. But the list goes on, and I just don't see a reason why to use Elemental Ordnance. For the loadout that I'm using in the background, which is the master version of K1 Crew Quarters on the Moon, I'm using Bountiful Wells on my helmet with both a grenade launcher ammo finder and a sword ammo finder. I cannot stress this enough when it comes to this build. There will be moments and times where you really wish you had them on when you didn't. So always, and I mean always, wear your double ammo finders. Up next over at my Controverse hold, I'm using Elemental Charge at the end of it with a momentum transfer, so that dealing damage with the grenade will also give me melee energy. Because I'm using Lament, I don't have to worry about the extra slot to use momentum transfer. But if you are using weapons that do need double champion mods, then you can just take the momentum transfer out. Moving over to my chest piece, I have this as solar with an explosive well maker at the end and 2 damage resist mods to change out to whatever I need them to be. Over at my boots, as always guys, I have them as void with protective light at the end, a better already, and an ammo scav of my choice. In this case, I'm using Lament, so I'm using a sword ammo scav. And then finally, over at the bond, this is going to be solar. I'm using passive guard because I'm using the Lament, well of ordnance next to it so that my solar wells give me grenade energy, and a bomber next to it, so using my rift will also give me grenade energy. And for what this build excels into, as I stated before, this is supposed to be able to solo every single lost sector in the entire game for your Warlock. So if you're ever just looking to farm exotics or get some really high stat rolls, then this is the build to get the job done. Overall guys, that's going to be the 3 best builds for Warlock for Season of the Lost. If you guys have any questions, please leave them down in the comments and I will get to them as fast as I humanly can. But that's gonna be it for me guys. I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye bye.